Okay, today I want to share, I've talked about this before, but I'd like to talk a little more about this because this is an important understanding. The four-body system that you indwell. The four-body system that you indwell is part of the seven-body system. The seven-body system includes the higher spiritual bodies. And when we talk about higher and lower, we're talking about vibration. So just as you can hear music here in the background and you can hear me talking, the instantaneous air pressure fluctuations in this room, that's what sound is. The sound that's occupying this room, it's not like, well, over here there's some sound and over here there's some sound, and they're actually in different places in space. They coexist within the same space. A little bit like if you have a glass of water and you put food colouring in it, you know, and sugar. The sugar of the food colouring and the water are coexisting in the same space. They're not. It's not like there's a layer of sugar and there's a layer of water and there's a layer of food colouring. That's just not how it is. So although you can't see the sugar dissolves, you can't see the sugar, but it's still there. So just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. So we're talking about grades, a scale of vibrations, and as from one particular vibration to another particular vibration, as far as frequency is concerned, the rate of vibration is concerned, these bodies have certain functions, quite discrete functions, although interdependent functions. Now, we're all familiar with the solid, liquid, gas bit. I hope. You know what a solid and a liquid and a gas is. Like, you know, solid's like ice and liquid is like water and gas is like steam. So we have a solid, liquid, gas component. So one of, you know, this great heresy of the forms of sensibility of time and space, in that the way the five senses operate, they operate on a very limited bandwidth, which was pretty much solid, liquid and gas. So you can't see anything higher than the solid, liquid, gas bit. But just like the sugar dissolved in the water doesn't mean that it's not there. It is there. They still are there. And then there's these four levels of ether which are talked about in esoteric literature. And people talk about how originally on this planet our bodies were etheric. The human body was etheric, which I'll go into later. So we have some very interesting phenomena which exists on this planet, but I'll just go through those various strata levels as far as the physical plane is concerned. So we have the solid, liquid, gas bit. The first level of ether is actually heat. Right? Now heat's an important part of our bodily system. It's an important part of, you know, no heat, die. It's an important part of the energetic system, and we're able to actually generate heat internally. Some animals can't do that, most can, but we certainly can, which is an important part of contributing towards life. And I'm not going to go into thermodynamic theory. If you want to study heat and its effects, you can certainly study that yourself. So the next level of ether is magnetism. Hopefully you are familiar with what magnetism is. This is what people call, you know, part of the life force, but really heat's part of the life force experience as well. Magnetism is part of the life force experience. That's really what prana is. It's that level in the etheric body. I'm not going to go into detail of the anatomy and physiology aspects of what these bits do, but I may in future moments. So we have solid, liquid, gas, and heat, magnetism. Electricity is the next level. Electricity is what some people call chi. Some people call electricity and the magnetism bit vital force together. They sort of work together, but they are actually different levels of vibration, and they do actually serve independently. So just as you have a blood supply system, a circulatory system for blood, you also have, in the etheric levels, you have a circulatory system for heat, you have a circulatory system for magnetism, and a circulatory system for electricity. And if you have problems with any one of those systems, you can be in big trouble. Now, the last level is light. The last level of ether is actually the light level. And so that's the real light body, and so it's actually at a relatively low level of vibration. And that, for most people, there's not a lot of activity there. If you're choosing fear, there's going to be not much activity there at all. And light is actually generated, which circulates through that level of the etheric body. That energy is actually caused by the fusion of spirit and matter. So unless you let spirit be active in your life, you're not generating internally, you're not actually generating the light which actually circulates through that particular body. So it actually can be, in a state of atrophy, almost to the point where it looks quite putrid clairvoyantly. We go into the emotional level, the astral plane, the next body, the emotional body. In this particular moment, I won't go into the 7 discrete levels, because that I could spend 2 days just discoursing on the function of those levels. But suffice to say that the lower levels of the lower 3 levels of the emotional body relate to impulses and urges, right? And the middle subplane relates to moods, and the higher 3 relates to what you would refer to, most people would refer to as emotion. And then we go into the mental plane, and as I've talked about this before, there's 7 levels of on the mental plane as well. The lowest level on that plane is called the instinctive mind, and then we have the habit mind, and then we have the thinking bit, the thinking mind, the conscious mind. Then the middle level on the mental plane is actually the feeling bit. That's actually the interface between the higher and the lower self. So everything below that level, the feeling level, is the lower self, and above is what people call the higher self. So that feeling level is actually the interface between the higher and the lower self. That's why it's a synthesis level. So it synthesizes what's coming from spirit and what's being experienced as far as what's happening within the physical plane. So that's an important level, and that's where the causal body exists, and that's what most people term the soul level. The real soul is actually on the next level up, which is the Buddhic plane, but the causal body, which actually is the whole mechanism which controls karma, cause and effect, actually exists on that feeling level and outplays entirely on a feeling level. So then from then up, so that thing actually interprets and interfaces and synthesizes between the higher and lower self. The next level is the level of ideas. The next level is the level of concepts, and we're going up in vibration. They're not like layers. They're in a scale of vibration. And then the next level is what we would term knowing. I won't go any higher than that for the sake of this. Now, on the vast majority of planets, there's two ways that the evolutionary process works. And on the other planets in this solar system, this is actually what happens. Normally, anything which is supporting a human consciousness, like we are, doesn't have a solid liquid gas component. Right? Their lowest, densest body, is the first level of ether, which is heat, is the heat body, right? And because for some reason, which I'm not going to go into, but I could at some point, when the human consciousness externalized and actualized here, there was a certain amount of, let's call it, depravity, and the human consciousness was choosing fear, choosing selfishness. This is what the story in Genesis is trying to explain. And it actually caused a lowering of the vibration of the human vehicle here because of the way that the vehicle was being used. And it dropped down 3 levels. Because the solid liquid gas are actually the top 3 levels of what's called the 8th sphere, which is actually the realm beneath us in vibration. It's a whole other realm. So we have this almost unique situation because there was almost a malfunction in the evolutionary process, but because of what humans chose, what humans actually chose, caused this lowering. But the lowest vehicle, the densest vehicle, should be the heat body, like on Venus. You know, huge population on Venus, but their lowest vehicle is the heat body, right? So we have a difficulty here because the solid liquid gas bit of us, the bit which is so difficult to control, is actually operating vibrationally within the highest 3 subplanes of the realm actually beneath us. So to some degree we are open to the influence of that lower sphere. Now, in evolutionary terms, the 8th sphere compared to here, you've got to remember that's the top 3 levels. So on the 7 levels that we have here, there's not very many human beings on this planet that are active on the very top 3 levels of the logoic plane. You know what I mean? So in the 8th sphere, there's very, 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 very few beings in the 8th sphere that are actually active on those top 3 levels. But there are some, and when they do, if they're not entirely clear, psychologically clear, and if they're not entirely pure of motive, they see they see this thing as just a doorway into this sphere, right? And that's how you get poltergeists and demons and all of that stuff which is characterised as that coming into there. Thankfully, normally they'll just move through this vehicle and they want to get out and about, but sometimes they decide they want to appropriate the vehicle. That's how you get possessions and all of that kind of stuff. Most people then they do an exorcism, then they try to get rid of the thing out into this realm. What they should be doing is putting it back into its own realm. But anyway, so the reason that upstairs is so interested in what is going on here is because of that overlap. It's from a fishbowl kind of, watching ants kind of perspective, it's actually a fairly interesting kind of thing. But it presents a fairly unusual set of problems, right? The sort of primal fear that human beings are able to experience, things like terror, shouldn't be part of the human experience. It's part of the human experience because our lowest vehicle is the solid liquid gas thing, right? And I have explained this many times before, but I'm sharing it with you again in the hope that you understand that. Hence the need for the vigilance. Because there is quite a unique set of problems associated with the situation as we are here. Like most, so even if there is a planet, see, lots of planets have the 8th sphere and our sphere concurrently running the evolutionary process, but there's no overlap. But here there is this overlap of 3 subplanes. And in days past, there were actually people who went, wow, I like the whole magic thing and I like the sort of whole mastery thing, but I don't want to be a master here. What I can do is, just to develop a certain amount of mastery, and then I can then find a way to slip into the 8th sphere, and I can be top dog in the 8th sphere. And this used to be a big problem. So when masters like Dwalkul and others talk about sealing the door between the realms, this was actually deliberately done a long time ago, because it got to the point where there were so many beings coming from the 8th sphere into here, and from here going into the 8th sphere. I'm not going to go into that in a huge way. It's nothing to be scared of. If you are vigilant, if you practice your psychological clarity and your purity, then you have absolutely nothing to be concerned about. But there is a really good reason why you need to be vigilant. And that is it. So solid, liquid, gas, heat, magnetism, and what are the 4 levels again? Electricity and light. What I want you to do tonight is to really feel into those levels of the physical body. All those 7 levels. And I want you to find within yourself that point between the solid, liquid, gas, heat bit. And you can actually feel how this part is actually, there's above the solid, liquid, gas bit, there's this like, it's like poking your head out of the water. There is in this different realm, right? All of your consciousness and all of your causal awareness must always be maintained above the solid, liquid, gas bit, or you're in big trouble. And the reason most of you have trouble is because you're allowing control to be in those lower 3 levels. You cannot do that. It's not a good idea anyway to give the vehicle itself control of life in any way, be it on an impulse level or making decisions, but particularly the way the situation is here, it's potentially disastrous. And this is why so few people survive very long on the spiritual path, because they don't do this. Many isms, many so-called spiritual groups actually deliberately don't make this people aware of this, because they seem to be setting them up for a fall. I want you to feel into that and feel into your emotional body, okay? Now the lower aspects of your emotional body all relate to impulses and urges, yeah? And then the middle level, just like the middle subplane on the mental plane, the middle is an interface between higher and lower emotion, let's say. That's where the moods happen. And then emotion above that in the higher 3 subplanes. Ideally, the synthesis of the emotional and the mental body is best done by placing, imagine like a motionless still point on that middle level of the emotional plane, and the middle level of the soul interface, the causal body, the middle level of the mental plane over each other, over the physical centre in the region of the heart. That is the best way to maintain soul and spiritual control of this thing. Right? So the sort of fear which cripples human beings shouldn't really, it's not intended for human consciousness to have to deal with that. And that's why I want to share this, is to explain why that is actually the case. So you must be much more vigilant than you would normally be. So I want you to be able to feel the solid liquid gas part of you, the heat body part of you, the magnetism body part of you, the electricity body part of you, and the light part of you, and those strata, vibrational strata within the emotional body, which relate to urges and impulses, moods and emotion, and those levels in the mental body as well. The instincts, the habits, the thinking bit you're very familiar with. Remember, that's a very small part of, it's even a small part of the 4-body system, let alone the 7-body system. Small part, shouldn't be the boss, right? Tool that you use. And then the feeling bit of you is the interface between the higher and the lower. That's why I say you polarise yourself on the feeling level, because it is the interface between the higher and the lower, right? So you polarise that on that level, and it operates on this synthesised centre between the heart and the throat centre, synthesised between the lower centres and the higher centres here in the physical body. That is by far the best alignment, attunement and way to hold the chakra matrix to ensure that you are able to maintain spiritual control. You will feel bumps and shudders when certain things happen on a planetary level, but it's by far the best way to maintain mastery of this thing, right? You've got to know what it feels like. When you feel a disturbance within the lower vehicles, you've got to be able to know instantly where it is and how to address it, to counterbalance that, to bring that back into balance so that you can regain control immediately. That is a huge part of heart mastery, and we're going to be working more on that over the next few days. Yep. Okay.